All the news up next right here on Eyewitness News tonight.
Week at Alpha Beta, we cut your cost of living during our buy one, get one free sale. 5 Mission tortilla strips for $1.99 and the second bag is free. 5 garden fresh iceberg lettuce for only 79 cents and the second one is free. And when you buy a half gallon of Tropicana orange juice, the second carton is free. Dozens of your favorite brands to choose from. The more you buy, the more you'll save. Buy them all.
Jordanian leader said the destruction of Iraq was the aim of the Allies and called for Arab members of the coalition to work for a truce. 3,000 people shouted pro-Iraqi slogans, sang songs, and denounced President Bush during a 3-hour rally at a Palestinian refugee camp in Jordan yesterday. Their anger is in part fueled by Allied bombings of Jordanian tanker trucks carrying oil from Iraq.
Wall Street is midway through another day. Let's go to Jan Hopkins and get the latest from the street. Jan?
Thank you. Here on Wall Street, the blue chips are now heading higher after a slow start. Right now, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 10 2/3 points at a level of 2821.29. Volume is very heavy, 101 million shares.
Troop strongholds, bridges, and Scud missile launch sites overnight. U.S. pilots reported hitting one Scud launcher in southern Iraq. 3 other sites were also attacked in western Iraq. 3 individual missiles were reportedly destroyed. The launcher hit in southern Iraq is believed to be the one that fired a Scud at Riyadh, Saudi Arabia overnight. The Scud was tracked and destroyed by a U.S. Patriot missile. No damage or injuries reported.
For the second time since the Gulf War began, Arab infiltrators slipped across the Jordanian border into Israel today. 3 guerrillas attacked a bus that was carrying some Israeli soldiers, and they were shot and killed. CNN's Linda Scherzer has more on the story.
The gunmen ambushed a bus carrying Israeli soldiers on a well-traveled highway in the Negev Desert, 90 miles south of Jerusalem. The 3 heavily armed guerrillas carried knives, hand grenades, and Kalashnikov assault rifles. They managed to throw one grenade at the bus, then opened fire before an army patrol arrived and shot the 3 guerrillas to death.
Listen, some machine gun, very hot one, and then some grenade, and that's
Israel's defense minister says the gunman had targeted passing traffic along the highway. He says the guerrillas should have been stopped by the Jordanian army before they ever crossed into Israel.
The IDF went back very quickly and finished off the infiltrators. We have 4 lightly wounded. But it is an indication that the Jordanian government is not sufficiently successful in preventing these kind of incidents, and they know that they're responsible for the prevention of such incidents.
This is the 3rd time this year that guerrillas have infiltrated a border that in times of peace is normally quiet. Defense officials believe these incursions are a result of growing Islamic fundamentalism and anti-Western sentiment in Jordan that's fueled by the war. Israeli soldiers have been on a heightened state of alert on this border since the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. The army says it's prepared for Arab extremists who may try to open a second front against Israel to help Iraq.
Actually, we're also aware of those calls coming from Yasser Arafat to the Palestinians, either in Jordan or in Israel, to proceed and carry out more terrorist activities in Israel.
It is still unclear who these gunmen were, what group they were affiliated with, whether they acted alone. But the army says that it does appear these men were religious fundamentalists and that more and more of these border incursions are being carried out by men like them. Linda Scherzer, CNN, Jerusalem.
And we remind you that all reports from Israel must be cleared by the Israeli military.
In a moment, CNN correspondent Peter Arnett reports on the latest movements in Baghdad. Stay with us.
A lot of you insist on eating wheat thins and oat thins because they taste good. But the whole idea behind these crackers is that you can eat them without feeling guilty. That's why they're baked, not fried. I mean, eat them because they're delicious, and you miss the whole point.
Milk-Bone dog biscuits, dog treats, and flavor snacks. Happy Valentine's Day.
If you're like a lot of people, you're probably trying to cut back on caffeine. You certainly don't want to find it in unexpected places. So you might be surprised to learn that your pain reliever may contain caffeine. Check the label. There is no caffeine in Tylenol. With Tylenol, all you get is fast, effective relief.
Capital, international journalists traveling in and out of the country. CNN's Peter Arnett reports from Baghdad, as always, under the watchful eye of Iraqi government officials.
Leaving Baghdad for the outside world is a risky business, and a group of reporters had to load their bags in the dark Friday morning because there was air raids elsewhere in the city. The all clear meant relief and a chance to get on with the journey. The press group successfully negotiated the dangerous Baghdad-Jordan road, which is frequently subject to attack by multinational aircraft. Incoming reporters were in Baghdad by early evening. The Allies suspect the road of carrying military cargo, but Iraqi officials say only civilian transportation travels on it. A relative lull in Baghdad Friday encouraged regulars to gather at the Sadoun Street barbershop to get a needed hair trim and gossip about the war, now into its fourth week. The Iraqi capital is one of the main targets of the bombing campaign. One customer complained that his child was going crazy, his words, over worry about the bombing that resounds through the city. Another complained that life is getting boring with no television, no movie theaters open, and with power and water cut off. A store owner, Saeed Abdullah Riba, said the war started not January 7, but 7 months ago after Iraq invaded Kuwait and economic sanctions were imposed. He said he and his friends believed the United States should not be interfering in Arab affairs. But now that America is here to fight, he said, Iraq is up to the challenge. Newspapers are blaming the bombing for a rash of premature births in Baghdad. 30 a day caused by stress, the papers say. Doctors at a children's hospital told CNN early in the week that because there is not sufficient power to run the incubators at children's hospitals in the country, most premature babies are expected to die. Water remains a major problem, and the Tigris River that runs through Baghdad is a convenient locale for filling up cans and tubs. I talked to a young student at the scene, Qasim Aziz, and he said the bombing of the city so far was not as bad as he had expected. He said his brother is with a frontline unit in Kuwait and is ready to die for his country. The student expressed his terms for an end to the hostilities in the same phrases as his government does. International acceptance of Kuwait's remaining Iraq's 19th province, a position unacceptable to the world coalition, and one that brings a major land battle closer in Kuwait. Peter Arnett, CNN, Baghdad.
Again, a reminder that all of Peter Arnett's reports are monitored by Iraqi censors and his movements are restricted by the government. Also, you may recall recently an Iraqi woman who shouted at CNN cameras in English, accusing allies of bombing civilian targets. Well, CNN has learned that she works for the Iraqi government. Intelligence sources tell us she is a senior Iraqi diplomat, an assistant to Iraq's Undersecretary for Foreign Affairs.
We are Red Indians!
The weekly prayer services today in Tehran saw some political punches thrown at the United States. The spiritual leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei called the U.S. the aggressor in the Gulf War, said he no longer considers the United States to be a superpower. Not far from the Iranian capital yesterday, a tribute to Khamenei's predecessor, the late Ayatollah Khomeini. CNN's Christian Amanpour reports.
Under the stained glass, the chandelier and gold leaf motif, in a shrine fit for a king lie the remains of the Ayatollah Khomeini, Iran's late spiritual leader. The faithful push money through the open slot, funds for the upkeep of this mausoleum. On this, the 12th anniversary of the revolution, the women weep for Khomeini. The men chant and beat their breasts. This shrine is 20 kilometers from the capital, Tehran, but a world away from the political goings-on there. The people who come here don't know and don't much care that their president is trying to forge a coalition between Iran, France, and the Soviet Union in an effort to end the war and shape the region's future. Here they mourn their own war dead, the endless rows of graves testimony to the hundreds of thousands of Iran's sons and brothers who were killed by the Iraqi army.
There are those who say President Rafsanjani may have gotten ahead of his constituency by offering to talk to the U.S. and Iraq. Here at the Martyrs Cemetery, people have little time for either country, and they're wary of their president's moves towards the enemy.
Death to America, they chant in what has become a well-orchestrated ritual. At a ceremony marking the anniversary of the revolution, the Speaker of Iran's parliament accuses the U.S. of going to war not against Iraq, but for oil. Outside among the graves, this woman asks why America is at war. She says the U.S. has no business being in the Gulf. Few forgive the U.S. for supporting Iraq in its war against Iran. America killed all our young people, she says, by helping Saddam and giving him weapons. And yet, if you ask these same people what should become of Saddam Hussein, they say they hope the United States will kill him. Christiana Manpour, CNN, Tehran.
And our coverage of the war continues after this.
Well, most people, I think, have an image of what healthy food tastes like, and they think it's going to take all kinds of willpower to stick with it.
Diane Carroll makes the healthy choice.
Looking forward to filing stories about what they saw without the restrictions imposed by the Iraqi government. The Syrian defense chief says U.S. tanks are inferior to Soviet-made models used by Iraq. Mustafa Tlass says the best U.S. tanks break down in the sand. Soviet tanks, he said, are more suited to harsh climates. Tlass made his statements during a visit to Moscow, where he met with top Soviet military officials. Syria is a member of the multinational alliance against Iraq.
You see where the crane is on the edge of the jetty?
A new assessment by U.S. officials indicates a Persian Gulf oil spill is at least 40 miles from Saudi Arabia's biggest desalting plant. Previous estimates placed the Kuwaiti oil allegedly spilled by the Iraqis as close as 10 miles to the plant. U.S. officials say the original miscalculation was due to a map reading mistake by Saudi authorities. Gary Daughters, CNN reporting.
On what could be a watershed day in the Persian Gulf War, a ranking officer of the U.S. Central Command briefed reporters today on the progress of the war in Riyadh. CNN correspondent John Sweeney is there. Hello, John.
Hello, Bob. Well, actually, Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Colin Powell, have now arrived in Riyadh for a two-day visit, amid speculation that their visit is to determine the date for a possible ground offensive against the enemy. At a fuel stop in Ireland, Secretary Cheney said final decisions will be determined only after close consultations here.
Well, we expect to get a first-hand assessment from General Schwarzkopf and his senior staff and commanders on the status of the air campaign, how it's going, what they believe remains to be done. We also want to focus upon the deployment, the status of those forces we deployed after November 8th, and review planning for future aspects of the campaign. Look at what's anticipated with respect to the use of ground forces and questions of timing.
Meanwhile, a high-ranking Allied spokesman says the aerial bombardment has destroyed in excess of 600 Iraqi tanks in what the military calls the KTO, or the Kuwaiti Theater of Operations. Earlier in the day, British Defense Minister Tom King released that figure, and in Riyadh, the Central Command's Chief of Staff confirmed it.
Our figures would probably say that's a pretty darn close assessment of the number of tanks we've killed to date.
And a follow-up, the other thing Mr. King apparently said was that...
I'm talking about tanks, perhaps in excess of 600 tanks.
Right.
And General Johnston would not confirm King's other assessment that key enemy units had lost 15 to 20% of their tanks, their armored personnel carriers, and artillery. Iraq is said to have about 4,200 tanks in Kuwait. 600 destroyed after 3 weeks of bombing may seem to be a relatively small number, but for the first 2 weeks, key targets were not tanks, but command control centers and supplies. Now the Allied planes are zeroing in on the equipment. One source also said that about 400 pieces of artillery equipment have been destroyed so far out of an estimated 3,200-piece arsenal for Iraq. I'm John Sweeney, CNN, live in Riyadh.
The Associated Press today quotes a high-ranking Jordanian palace official as saying that King Hussein is so angry at U.S. treatment of Jordan in the Persian Gulf crisis, he is considering cutting ties with the United States. But Jordan's ambassador to the United States tells CNN that's not so. He says Jordan believes in dialogue and would like to keep all channels of communication open. Jordan has been a long-time ally of the United States. In a speech Wednesday, though, King Hussein angrily accused the United States and its allies of trying to destroy Iraq and impose Western control over the Middle East. Less than 24 hours after that speech, President Bush decided to place U.S. aid to Jordan under review, a technical status. The disclosure from the State Department represents an abrupt reversal of Bush administration policy on aid to Jordan. In the meantime, an anti-U.S. demonstration was held in Amman today. About 2,000 people marched through the streets of the Jordanian capital, many carrying signs saying "Death to America." At the rally, demonstrators praised Iraq and launched verbal attacks on Israel.
A previously unheard-of Muslim group reportedly is claiming responsibility for today's attack on a bus in Israel. That attack took place this morning near Paran, an Israeli village near the Jordanian border. 3 guerrillas crossed from Jordan into Israel, where they attacked a civilian bus carrying Israeli soldiers. A hand grenade thrown at the bus did not explode, and a firefight erupted. 3 attackers were killed, 4 Israeli soldiers slightly wounded. The claim of responsibility was sent to the French press agency in Amman, Jordan, by a group calling itself the Army of Mohammed. The communique said the guerrillas killed or wounded more than 70 Israeli soldiers in what it said was a 6-hour battle. Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Arens, who went to the scene of the attack, praised his troops, but says he is very concerned about the Israeli-Jordanian border.
All ended well. The IDF went into action very quickly and finished off the infiltrators. We have 4 lightly wounded, but it is an indication that the Jordanian government is not sufficiently successful in preventing these kind of incidents.
Israel warned Jordan that it will be held responsible for keeping infiltrators out. Our coverage of the war in the Gulf continues in a moment. Today's roundtable discussion on the conflict in the Gulf.
War dominating the agenda. Quayle spoke at General Dynamics, the giant defense contractor, during the past hour. He toured the firm's Tomahawk cruise missile facility and told the workers they compose what he called the Great American Workforce. He now heads to Phoenix to address the Luke Air Force Base families. The British military says 13 more Iraqi planes have flown to Iran. That, they say, raises the total number to 147. Iran has said the planes will be grounded until the war ends. U.S. Coast Guard officials in the Gulf region are revising the location of the smaller of 2 oil slicks. They say it's 40 to 60 miles from a vital desalination plant in Saudi Arabia, not 10 miles. The Coast Guard blames the discrepancy on a map-reading mistake by Saudi authorities.
Our daily roundtable discussion on the Gulf War allows us to present a forum of personal opinions on the conflict. Today we look at political versus military victories in the Middle East.
Readiness to help President Bush make a timetable for a ground war. Scotland Yard is asking the public to help track down the workshop where police think IRA terrorists mounted mortar launchers on a van. One mortar shell blew up in the garden behind the Prime Minister's residence Thursday morning. The British government says it'll review security around number 10 Downing Street following the Irish Republican Army attack. Saudi Arabia has closed its first water desalination plant ahead of an advancing oil slick. What is believed to be a relatively small facility north of Jubail at Safaniya has been shut down, apparently as a preventive measure, although no oil, authorities say, entered the plant. The Iraqi government wants the United Nations to determine whether Allied bombing destroyed a baby formula plant or a biological weapons factory. Iraq's ambassador to the UN has asked that a delegation visit Iraq to make that assessment. The U.S. claims the plant was making biological weapons. Iraq says it made baby formula. Time now for a business news update. Jan Hopkins at the New York Stock Exchange. Good afternoon, Jan.
Good afternoon, Bob. Here on Wall Street, stocks have resumed their...
Is assistant to the Iraqi Undersecretary for Foreign Affairs, Nizar Hamdoun, the former Iraqi ambassador to the United States.
In Peru this week, 2 people were killed in a political terrorist bombing at the office of a private security company. That company provides guard service to the U.S. Embassy in Lima. Now, this incident was not related to the Persian Gulf War, but more and more, private security companies are being used to protect strategic locations against terrorist attacks. Correspondent John Camp has more on the changing face of the private security industry.
All together now, here we go.
Despite appearances, these are not military maneuvers.
Come on, let's go.
These soldiers belong to a vast civilian army, available for hire by governments and corporations throughout the world. These soldiers work for Wackenhut Corporation. They are armed to protect against sabotage, eavesdropping, and now terrorist attacks.
The increased fear of terrorism brought about by the Gulf War has been a boon to the private security industry. With tools borrowed from the space age and a little James Bond thrown in, security companies have reached new levels of technological sophistication.
The companies now provide high-tech helicopters equipped with laser sighting devices, intricate electronic equipment capable of seeing through walls, dogs trained to sniff out bombs.
As the crisis has gone on, we've seen an increase in the sophistication of the services that our client base is requesting.
Traditionally, private firms have provided security for strategic installations, such as the plutonium-producing Savannah River site in Georgia and the Rocky Flats bomb factory in Colorado. Now these agencies are being called on to protect the executives who run the facilities.
They've tightened security around the installation. The real way now to get to that installation or that company is through the executive.
To protect these and other security-conscious executives, private security companies have expanded their services beyond the basics of self-protection seminars and personal guards. For example, the use of the latest technology in electronic surveillance.
How easy is it now to conceal surveillance equipment, for instance, a camera?
Well, John, that's an interesting question. If you look to your left, you're right in the middle of the view of one of our hidden cameras that's secreted here in the stereo.
Other gadgets now used by private security firms, like this eavesdropping detector, were once only available to government agencies.
This is a device, a piece of equipment which is able to detect if circuits have been concealed inside of furnishings and artifacts or built into a wall area.
Experts say the use of hidden eavesdropping devices is widespread. Even as CNN was producing this story, electronics specialist Richard Lunn overheard what appeared to be the illegal bugging of conversations.
The radio channel, when I looked down at it, was a channel that I had programmed in the scanner because it's frequently used by European manufacturers of telephone transmitters and intelligence gathering transmitting devices.
What's your guess of what it is?
it's very likely that someone has purchased some equipment and brought it into the country, probably illegally, and maybe using it for some illegal telephone monitoring.
Besides high-tech electronics, some private security companies have their own intelligence gathering system.
We have information on the terrorism.
Their computer networks provide inside information about high-risk travel and track developments in political hotspots around the world.
We point out the traditional targets of the various Palestinian terrorist groups.
John Bedrosian spent 25 years with the CIA and the U.S. Department of State before entering the private sector.
It gives multinational corporations, other clients, an alternate source of information, one that isn't biased.
For years, the private security business was viewed as a low-tech industry. Unskilled guards protecting warehouses and convenience stores. New technology and corporate demands for more sophisticated protection were already changing the security business. And now, the war and the fear of terrorism have made personal security a high-tech growth industry. I'm John Camp, CNN Special Assignment.
And if you'd like to write the Special Assignment staff, the address is Post Office Box 2727, Atlanta, Georgia 30301.
Letters from around the world to CNN, coming up next.
A cold always starts small. A stuffy nose, a little sneeze. But before you know it, your cold is full grown. That's when you need Dimetap, the grown-up medicine. If it was any stronger, you'd need a prescription. Maximum strength Dimetap Extend tabs work for 12 full hours. It's the way to relieve the congestion and sneezing of a full-grown cold. Dimetap, relief for the full-grown cold.